Hi there, I'm Stan Baker, one of the hosts of Circle Forum, along with Shelley Steele and Steve Young. In this episode, we continue the conversation about how to address the Canadian issue of student attendance in schools. Our guest this week is Jennifer Dunkley, Superintendent of Education at the Northeastern Catholic District School Board in Ontario. Jennifer talks about how, despite historical hesitations to discuss attendance publicly, there is a need for more open dialogue to address the challenges facing schools and families. Community partners and collaboration have become even more essential post-COVID in addressing attendance challenges effectively.
This week's podcast is brought to you by the yellow school bus. The yellow color was actually chosen for its visibility. Yellow stands out in various weather conditions and lighting and dates back to a 1939 Columbia University study in the USA. Yellow was chosen for its effectiveness in enhancing safety on the roads. Go, yellow school bus. Go safely.
At the end of this episode, be sure to visit our website, www.restorative.ca, where you can find some great ideas to address student attendance from a restorative relational perspective. If you really enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe on Spotify or YouTube. And now let's head over to this discussion with Shelley, Steve, and me, Stan.
I do think the topic of student attendance is something that's top of mind for pretty much every educator in Ontario. Certainly, superintendents around the table and principals around the table are having this conversation regularly. And I think we need to be able to have it more publicly in order to be able to address the very real issues that are facing our schools and that are facing our families and trying to get our students into our schools.
So why is there a hesitation to talk about this publicly?
And I'm not really sure, to be quite honest. Our school board is one that has struggled with student attendance for a number of years. And certainly it seems that student attendance post-pandemic has become a much more publicly talked about concern. For our school board, prior to the pandemic, the conversation was not as broadly shared amongst educators and school boards, I think. And almost to the point where it was a little bit taboo. I think as a school board, we felt that we had tried to make a dent in some of the concerns that were facing us around student attendance and weren't finding much traction. But there wasn't a lot of community conversation. So when we think about our partners that we rely on for many things, our child and family services, our local police, our health units, all those kinds of things, the concept of partnering with them around student attendance wasn't anywhere on the agenda. And certainly in Ontario, there was monitoring of student attendance, and it felt a little bit like a blame and shame. And so there was a little bit of that feeling that, okay, we're not doing well, we're trying really hard, it's not getting better. And so I just think that the conversation post-pandemic has become much more in the public sphere, where certainly for us as a school board, we're not feeling that we are the only school board that is facing this challenge. And so there's definitely a shift in the conversations we're having with our community partners around how we're all going to address this problem. And there's a broader sense of urgency in the community that this is a community problem.
That's wonderful, because that often was, this is a school problem, this is a school board problem. When we would reach out to our partners pre-pandemic, that was always there. Okay, we'll help you where we can, but this is really your issue unless there's something that fits our mandates. So how have those conversations changed? What are they hearing now that they didn't hear before?
So I think there's a general just understanding more of that concept that it takes a village. We all say that, but I almost think that in the face of staffing shortages and financial restraints, that we're really understanding that we all do have to do that, or we're not going to make the changes that we want to see or support the students in the way that we hope we can. So certainly we've had some more recent conversations. Public health, it's come up definitely on their agenda. So we have 2 health units within our school board, and both of them are starting to talk about student attendance as a concern and as a need and as maybe a signal of community health. So that's a different angle that maybe we would not have seen before.
It's often the same families that all of these organizations are dealing with, right? How do you get over the barrier of not being able to share information so that we all know the same family that we're talking about.
Mhm. In the situations where student attendance has become a chronic issue, there's often a willingness, even on the parts of families, to engage, and they're trying to get supports in some way. So, to that end, sometimes it's becoming a little bit more easy to share information because we have the consent of the parents or the guardians.
Who initiated, let's have different kind of conversations than we'd had before? Did the school board need to present, here's the impact of kids not going to school long term?
We have a strong focus on student mental health and well-being, and we have a mental health leader assigned to lead that work in our board. The mental health leader in our board has that network with the community agencies for that purpose, for mental health purposes. We have aligned student attendance completely within our mental health strategy because they are so inextricably connected. And because of that, that's a natural fit to when we're talking about what is our mental health strategy, what is our 1-year action plan, student attendance is all over it. And so in engaging those in those community partner, the regular meetings where we're talking about student mental health, attendance is a natural fit into that conversation. And within the last 2 years, that has become more of a direct agenda item, if you will. And so this is the same group of people that are all meeting, right? So that the community partners are on both school boards. It's the same messaging they're hearing from both parts. So that's where our movement has come a little bit through there. And like I said, again, it's definitely hitting the health units as well. In the Timiskaming area, that health unit there is also looking at starting up a campaign of what does this look like around attendance. And so we're working through that process with them. But it was interesting, for one of the first times, we weren't the ones putting student attendance on the table. It was coming from a community partner saying, we need to do something about student
That's
attendance.
powerful.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Very
Yes.
powerful.
Yeah. Particularly health units, right? Because they carry a lot of weight around all the things we have to do around public health. And to see attendance as a public health concern or lack of attendance, that's a huge step.
I was talking with a superintendent a number of years ago, when pre-COVID, when we were talking about just attendance in general. And he said, one of the things that we've done as school boards is we've set ourselves up because we've made attendance a special portfolio for specialists. And so my role in the classroom doesn't have, I just have to make a referral. And one of the things he talked about was a handoff culture. I just hand them off to the vice principal, who hands it off to somebody else, who hands it off to the attendance portfolio. How has that gone in your school, and what kinds of things have you done internally to make it everyone's concern?
That's a great point, that concept of a handoff culture. And certainly that is a culture that we have to keep working on. I feel like this year, for sure, we can celebrate some positive movement in that regard of moving away from a handoff culture and really building an understanding that it will take everyone in the school building to get our students in those doors and in those doors every day. So some of that work can be attributed when you think about the messaging we're putting out around what are our student attendance policy and procedures, who is sharing the messaging. So I would say that student attendance counselor's work has largely become more of a promotional piece, and she's very visible in our schools, working with students, working with our principals to put on attendance campaigns. I think our continued work will be really to get towards the classroom as well. So to engage our teachers a little bit more directly in the process. When teachers are already tasked with many different things that they are responsible for, I completely understand that idea that there's a bit of the belief that it should be someone else's job to get the students in the classroom. And when they're here, I will teach them. And I can appreciate that for sure. But that there's nothing more than I can underscore the importance of a caring connection between a teacher and a student, and what that will do to bring a student in more than anything that we could do with someone whose portfolio was attendance and they're over here, but they're not there every day.
I loved what you said about the trust, the caring adult, because I think that really speaks to the heart of some of the work that we've done with school districts, as well as to say, the more we can develop that connection, the more likely somebody is to notice that a student is away, and the more likely we are to have that connection be something that pulls the student back into the classroom.
For sure. Some of our work this year, we engaged in a formal student attendance audit, and we collected feedback from all of our educator and support staff groups, our parent groups, our community groups, but we also went to the students themselves and asking students who had both were successful in attending school, what is making you come regularly? What are those supports that you have in place? And asking students that have struggled, what was the barrier? What are the differences that are making a difference now? And that idea of feeling welcome and feeling connected to somebody in the school came out loud and clear over and over again. And it doesn't have to just be the teacher, the classroom teacher that student is assigned to, but there needs to be somebody in the building that student feels that they are connected with. And so that's, again, hearing that back from them. We know that's work we have to continue doing to making sure that all of our kids are feeling that they connect with someone in our building so that they have the feeling of being there, and it's important that they are at school.
Yeah, we had a student who was also a bit of a behavior concern in one of our schools, and his connection was with the custodian, and he lived for the breaks, for recess breaks, because he and the custodian would just go around and they would just do some custodian things. Now, this guy was amazing. And what happened was the discipline went down for this individual because he was busy every recess and break. He wasn't out on the yard creating havoc. And it was just a great situation. So to your point, it doesn't have to just be the teacher, but it does need to be someone.
If we go to that CBC article that talked about attendance, referenced the lack of data across the country and how difficult it was to glean data from all the different school boards and find anything that you can make comparable. It seems like an apples and oranges thing. Have you had a chance to speak to other school boards and some of the data they may be collecting to see if they're on the same pathway as you?
Over the last few years, we did ask for some clarification of how that number was being calculated, just to get a good sense of, okay, we're tracking data in a specific way in our student information system that's getting fed to the ministry, and they're coming up with a calculation of what our rate looks like. Let's get an understanding of what that actually means. And so basically the way that works is of every day that students could attend school, how many days did they actually attend? And that generates out to a percentage of attendance. Where it gets a little bit tricky is that there are different ways to code absences in our schools. And you're all shaking your head. You may be familiar with the word.
Talk to us about A's and G's, all right? Come on.
A's and G's. So certainly wrapping your mind around the A's and G's has been an interesting journey for us. Like I said, as a school board that has struggled in this area, we've done a lot of work to try to make sure, are we collecting the data in the right way? Is it getting fed through in the right way? Do we have a solid understanding of what the rules are? Those kind of basic steps, right? When you're trying to address a problem. And certainly the idea of the G day being a general absence is the official term in the policy, but the general absence definitely had a history in what people would have called an excused absence. So that belief that if I'm coded with a G, that it's acceptable in some way. And it's not just a lingering A absence. There's a reason that I can justify, and the ministry has put out parameters about what's okay to be allowed under that. But at the end of the day or the end of the year, all of those G's are still days away from school. So even if we can convince our parents, Stephen, when you talked about the excusals, the hockey tournaments, the vacations down south, the flights are not good in March break, so I'm going to go at a different time. There's processes where parents can excuse, if you will, their children from school, and those will be recorded through a process, and it feels very above board, but at the end of the year, those will also count as absences for that student. And so that's a bit tricky to navigate. So what we, again, education piece, how many days are we talking about in a year? So we talk about that sweet spot number of, we'd like you to have fewer than 17 absences if you can overall. And that includes all of them, everything you can think of. It doesn't matter how it's coded, it needs to be less than 17. And that's really what we're shooting for. So again, reculturing people to understand that even though these processes exist, they're still going to count towards your overall absenteeism rate.
I struggle. I was a principal for over 20 years, and I can't remember any school I was ever in where we didn't argue incessantly over how to code the absences and whether the, and I love what you're saying, Jen. I would say it doesn't matter what the reason is, they're still not here. And whether it's excused, unexcused, half days, all the half days add up to be how many full days, they're still missing huge chunks of their learning. And it doesn't matter why they're missing it. So we need to do something about it.
And messaging to parents is really important. And typically, parents underestimate the number of days that their kids have been missing. They took the example from the utility companies, basically collect the data of, say, hydro use from everybody in the neighborhood. And they would send out a note to everybody saying, here's your hydro use this month. And here's what all your neighbors used. Your use is a little bit higher than the rest.
And I remember when Ontario did that.
Yeah, Ontario Hydro did that a few years ago.
They certainly did.
And so what happened was people started looking at that and saying, hey, I've got to do things to save some more electricity. The suggestion from the research that was done was, here's what your attendance rate is so far. Here's the average in your class. What do you think of that idea? Hydro visits the classroom.
I do remember receiving that Ontario Hydro notice and wondering, with my family of 5 and 3 young children, what the difference would be between my neighbors. Wasn't good. But it did inspire us to make some changes. So I understand the thinking. We've tried many different ways to share information with parents. And certainly one of the strategies we adopted, we implemented a few years back, was to share the outcome at the end of the year as a welcome back to the next year. So for all the families that were continuing with us and the students that were continuing with us in August, they received a notice that outlined what their children's attendance was for the year before, sharing some information about the importance of being at school, what was the expected rate of attendance, those kinds of things. We got mixed reviews on sending that information out. The feedback that we got was typically not positive about those letters. And again, much that I said when the ministry was sending us the where do you fall in the 72 school boards, and it felt a little blame and shame, I'm sure it felt similar for some parents. So I think it's a strategy that might work if it's done in a way that doesn't feel blame and shame and is meant more around the idea of a supportive way of sharing information so that people understand.
We would agree with you completely if we can get away from the blaming, because that was the response of one parent, for example, whose child's attendance was pointed out to her just as a matter of course. And we're actually going to do some research on this. She said, no way, I don't want my child involved in this research project. I'm doing everything that I can. What more do you want? I'm a single mom. Get off my back. And she took it completely as a comment on her parenting and felt very blamed for not having her child at school as much as someone else.
I think there's a place for relationship, right? Much that we said that student needs to feel connected to someone in our schools. I think if we're going to be able to have an impact on supporting families who may be struggling with student attendance, they need to feel that we are working with them as a team and not coming to them with more judgment for what they might already be struggling with.
Yeah, relationship with parents, especially in the primary grades, is absolutely crucial to setting that attendance pattern. I wanted to ask you about 3 wishes. If you could have 3 wishes for attendance at your board, what would you wish for?
You'll have to give me one moment because I don't want to waste any of these wishes.
And you can't wish for
more wishes.
You cannot wish for more wishes either.
Yeah.
First thing, I will be completely honest, the first thing that came to mind, and it doesn't really directly relate, it directly relates to student attendance, but you might not think that it really does, is number 1, I would wish that every student had a means to arrive to school safely on a daily basis that was not going to be randomly interrupted by things outside of their control. If I could have that wish come true, I think we would make a very significant dent in our student absenteeism struggles. And that means in Northeastern Ontario, that means bus driver shortage, ongoing cancellation of routes. It means the weather cooperates and buses are actually able to attend to their routes as they need to be. It means that parents have a way to get their children to school if they don't have access to busing. So if we could just have that sorted, that would have a huge positive impact on our student attendance.
That's a great wish. That's a great wish. Okay, so wish number
that's
2.
One. Okay, I think number 2, I would say that if we had a climate in which our parents and guardians felt confident and supported enough to tell us very early on with the struggles that they were facing that were going to lead to student attendance issues, that maybe we could provide some intervention before things crept up and became very difficult. Because as we've said, we know that once students start to not attend regularly, that becomes a pattern that's very hard to break. When we do have struggles in the home around food security or around clothing or the transportation piece, if there was just an ability to name those things in a safe way with our school community to see how we can help align those supports, that would be another wish. Again, we can't make all these problems go away, but could we at least name them early on?
There's 2 really excellent wishes. And wish number 3.
I think wish number 3 really would center on that, again, on that relationship piece, that every student that was in the Northeastern Catholic District School Board felt that they belonged in our schools and felt that they were cared for by at least one, but ideally every member of their school community, and that they felt that that was a safe place that they wanted to be at every single day.
You've got the choir that you're preaching to on that wish for sure. That's been a central part of a lot of the work that we've done with some of the school boards in Northwestern Ontario, for sure.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. As I said, this is a bit out of my comfort zone, but I've really enjoyed the conversation. And I think it's important that we continue to have these conversations around student attendance. And this has inspired me to, bring those conversations to other tables as well. So thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome. What I've really appreciated is I started to jot down points, but then the theme came out that you've gotten really real about attendance there. Right? It's been really easy to say, oh, parents now know that there's other ways for kids to get their education. And you said, no, actually, they're not saying that anymore. And then the real around we've got to educate parents on the importance of attendance, but you're also educating your community, and the partners are now aligning with you or working with you on it. So that's what I really picked out this theme, but you're just like, okay, no, let's just really start talking about it instead of passing it off that it's somebody else's issue. Let's look at our own numbers and let's get real with it. So I've really appreciated that part of it. Thank you.
I just appreciate the last 3 wishes, and you give us 6 wishes or 10 wishes. What they all have in common is it's indicating that there isn't one thing that's going to cure this problem or fix this problem. It's a whole variety of different things have to come in place.
As Jennifer points out in our conversation, despite efforts to collect data consistently, there are complexities in determining the true impact of absences on student learning, particularly when it comes to coding absences with excused and unexcused absent codes. She underscores again the importance of fostering relationships with students, with parents, and with guardians, as well as early intervention strategies to address the underlying issues affecting attendance, such as transportation or home struggles. Find out more about our work with restorative practices and addressing student absenteeism at www.restorative.ca. You can send me an email to stan@restorative.ca. Student attendance at school is a Canada-wide problem. Let's keep the open and public conversation going.